to the Early Weigh-In podcast. If you're hanging out with us, it takes just 2 seconds to hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help you boys out a ton. Man, we are back for UFC 261, in front of a full crowd, walkout, the real Joe Rogan interviews, and man, the UFC put together quite a pay-per-view for us.
Yeah, an absolute killer pay-per-view. It's headlined with 3 title fights. Starting off, we have Valentina Shevchenko taking on Jessica Andrade. Then we have a heated matchup with Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. And then it's headlined by the rematch between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. Last week we were so close to going positive. If we had just played Tony Gravely straight, we actually would have had a 2-unit positive night. Really kicking ourselves in the ass, and moving forward, we're going to be looking to play our straight bets a little bit harder rather than taking in props or trying to parlay items to give us more value.
For sure.
We do have a full lineup of 13 fights, so let's not waste any time and jump right into it.
Sir.
We start off with the women's strawweight division, where we see Ariane Carnelossi, who's 12-2, taking on the Dragon Girl Liang, who's 15-4. Carnelossi, she's a black belt in Muay Thai and absolutely ripped. Mm-hmm. If I'm being honest, she really resembles somebody like Jessica Andrade in there. Along with her hands, she really does have devastating kicks that she can mix in there, and we saw that in her fight against Ketlin Souza, where she, kicked her in the body and finished her. In this fight, I was a little bit worried about Carnelossi's takedown defense, but after tape study, I did feel a little bit better about it, and I ultimately texted you that I wanted to play her. She did, I saw a couple of really good sprawls. I saw in her fight against Gloria DePaula, plenty of takedown defense and even some offensive wrestling of her own, which I was pretty surprised about. And then when you go into Dragon Girl, not a lot of tape that you can find out there, but from what I saw, I watched the UFC's China Combine video that she had, and it seems like everybody's in agreement that she's an exceptional talent, just a little raw right now. In the tape study that I was able to find, she shoots right off the bat just about every single time, and I think that this fight you could probably get a good idea of how it's going to go in the first 10 seconds, whether or not Carnelossi stuffs the initial takedown of Liang here. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, man, so we're disagreeing right off the bat here come fight number 1. With Ariane Connelossi, man, we've only seen her in the octagon one time all the way back in 2019 against Angela Hill there, where she lost via doctor stoppage in the 3rd round. She got cut up right above the eye with a nasty, nasty elbow. She hasn't fought since, man, but at 28 years old, I do expect improvements. Anytime she's away from the cage, she's built like an absolute little brick shit house. Probably benches more than you and me combined, dude. But she, I compared her a little bit to William Knight to me, as she tries to use that strength rather than the technique that I like to see. And that Angela Hill, she really kind of had a meathead way of trying to close the distance. I thought she chased Angela Hill more than cutting her off against the cage, and really paid at range against a relatively good striker there. But she throws really hard leg kicks, man. Her Muay Thai is on point. She actually struggled in the clinch with Angela Hill, which kind of worries me, because on the side of Liang, the first thing you notice is the size advantage this girl has. She's going to be 7 inches taller, have a 5-inch reach, and my God, I hope anybody can use that to their advantage in a fight. But, the activity is on her side as well. She's had all 19 of her fights in the last 5 years, 4 wins since we've seen Carnelossi in the octagon, as well as her most recent win coming just in January. You look through the resume, she has dropped the big fights without a doubt. She got beat up bad by Agapova. Lily Shakarova, who's in the UFC now, she lost to her. And then she has a loss to, the undefeated Bellator champ there in Juliana Vasquez, who, undefeated and just took Elimele McFarland's first loss from her as well. And then she's actually beaten, fellow UFC girl there in Liliana Jojua. So, she's battle-tested, in my opinion, here. You talked about the Combine. She's a graduate of the Shanghai PI Institute and stuff that they got over there. She's just younger, more athletic, man. It has all the physical tools in the world. It's a very low-level fight for me, and I don't, even if we agree, it'd be hard to put our reputation for the podcast on one of these fights. But I'm going to lean with the bigger girl there, Liang. Probably not too confident, though.
So I had to do some digging to find this, but I did find her fight against Agapova. Really grainy, but from what I understand, or from what I could find out, if she doesn't get that initial takedown, she's fucked. Yeah. I mean, Agapova beat the snot out of her, knocked her out 3 times probably in that finish. Something that a lot of people aren't talking about is how tall Liang is. Her being a wrestling heavy attack, I do think that she'll have trouble getting in on the hips of Ariane, being only 5'2", and that's kind of where I see this playing out. Where I was saying in the first 10 seconds, whether or not that first takedown is stuffed will kind of tell you how this fight will play out. Really excited that we don't agree on the first one. That kind of makes things interesting.
For sure, man. We stay in the flyweight division here for the men's, where we see Jeff Molina, who's 8-2, taking on Qileng Aori, who's 18-6. Sorry if I butchered the name there. Probably a constant theme throughout the night. But man, Molina's sitting on a pretty nice little 7-fight win streak there. He's coming off his Contender Series win over Jacob Silva. He's a BJJ purple belt there, and he's got some work under Dwayne Ludwig in the Bang Muay Thai system. But he's a real product of James Krause there, at Glory MMA. This guy is extremely confident in his work on the mat. That's why you see him throw so many kicks at range, because he doesn't really mind ending up on his back. He'll switch stances, man. He's got a good body kick out of southpaw. When he switches to orthodox, look for him to beat up that lead leg. And on the feet, he's real patient. A lot of feints, good counter puncher, good cardio. But at 23 years old, man, he's still very, very green, and that takedown defense has caused him some issues in the past. On the side of Aori there, talk about not a lot of tape to watch. There's not a lot out there on him, man. There's not a lot about his gym, his training partners. Not a lot to see there. But the fights that I do get to see, this guy just is willing to walk through your shots, to land his, has no respect for some of these guys. And that's noticed, up at bantamweight. So dropping down to flyweight, I'm wondering if he's going to respect Molina's power at all, or if he's just going to walk through him with his right hook, or with his right hand, his left hook. Man, this is a close fight. With the lack of tape on Aori is probably why it's a pick 'em. I'm going to lean with Jeff Molina, but I'm really not too confident on it. How do you see it?
So I also lean with Jeff Molina, but not confident enough to play it. To be honest with you, man, whenever I watch tape study, this looked like a boy versus a man. Aori really does bring the power and size advantage into this one, and I think that's something that people are most worried about into this. You talked about Molina's suspect takedown defense. Yeah, it's shown throughout his career, and in the few tapes that we did get to watch of Aori, he did utilize the takedown relatively often. Jeff Molina, similar to Chase Hooper, I feel like at only 23, he hasn't really grown into his body. His lower body kind of resembles Joseph Benavidez, and I think that's kind of where his takedown defense struggles, is he just hasn't filled out as a human. Up until this point, Molina really hasn't been tested. His level of competition really comes into question here. In his last 2 fights, I guess are his 2 biggest ones, but just 3 fights ago, he was fighting guys that are 2-1. That's something that you don't necessarily like to see in somebody who's already entered into the UFC. Aori, he started his MMA career in 2015 and was fighting anywhere from 3 to 8 times a year, and then up until 2020, where he's only fought 1 time in January and has taken this big long layoff. I think that there's a lot of questions in what he might bring to the table. Being only 27 years old, he definitely could have added some more tools to his game that we haven't seen yet. I think that if this does stay on the feet, Molina's going to have the edge here. Aori does tend to be reckless, and even his defense seems a little amateurish, or at least odd. Similar to like Alistair Overeem, he'll just shell up and kind of let you punch yourself out, and that's something that I don't think Jeff Molina's going to do. So if this does stay on the feet, I definitely lean Molina, but it isn't something I'd want to put my hard-earned money on. Yeah,
I mean, you talked about the level of competition. Aori is really nothing to write home about. This guy is about to make his 25th UFC, or not UFC, 25th, professional walk there, and he's still fighting guys on the Chinese regional scene with 6 and 7 fights. But the biggest thing that I like to note here, and probably what's keeping me away from it, Aori is typically a bantamweight. He's never made the 125 limit before. This is going to be something brand new for him, and I think once he gets in the octagon, if he does make the weight okay, I think it's going to be a pretty big size advantage and strength advantage, like you said. So even though we lead Molina, I think it's a trick fight. I'm glad we're staying away.
There's one more thing. I wrote down hittable for both these guys, and if they weren't 125ers, looking at how their styles are, I would have wanted to play the under here. I just definitely am going to stay away from that. But the stylistic, I think this should be a barn burner.
Yeah, man. I literally put that this is a sleeper fight, man. Honestly, not much known about the guys, but probably going to be a stand-up war.
Awesome. Next up in our lightweight division, we have Zhu Rong, who's 17-3, taking on Kazula Vargas, who's 11-4. Zhu Rong, he's on a 10-fight win streak against some questionable opposition, to say the least. He's averaged around 4 fights a year since he debuted in 2016. making his debut at 16 years old, which is questionable to say the least. 15 of his 17 wins are by KO or submission, and he really doesn't waste time trying to get that finish. In the fights that I did watch, 2 fights ago, Liang, he landed this clean 1-2 that finished him in the first round. And, the Liang guy, 17-5, definitely the best opponent he's faced up until this point, and he showed that he dusted him. Yeah. That was nice to see. I also saw in a couple other tape that he's strong in the clinch. He'll wrap you up and take you down. And overall, he seemed pretty legit. That being said, it's not a lot of tape to go on. Now, in Kazula Vargas, 0-2 in the UFC. All but one of his wins are by KO or sub. So you know that this one's going to be a barn burner. But, man, in that Brock Weaver fight, obviously doesn't have a lot of cage awareness. I mean, it was one of the dirtier knees to the head on a grounded opponent that I've ever seen in my life. Like, way worse than the Peter Yan Aljamain Sterling one. Vargas, not only that, he didn't touch gloves in that fight. Yeah. He's a dirty fighter, I think he's a dirty Brazilian fighter, and he just wants a war. He ducks his head and throws these huge overhand rights and just hopes and prays to land. I think this one, Scott fight doesn't go the distance written all over it, but we've been burned plenty of times on that. And I think we're going to stay away from that this week.
Yeah, absolutely, man. On the side of Vargas, you're right. 0-2 start to the UFC. In his debut against Alex De Silva, just flat out, out-grappled for 15 minutes, out-wrestled, gave up his back multiple times, and then follows it up with that absolute ridiculous performance against Brock Weaver, as illegal knee as it gets there, man. And after that, I remember reading stories or seeing stuff on social media about, that's not the first time this guy's done something like that. Apparently he's done stuff like that, in training. He's just got a bad rep for being a dirty fighter. He's been a year, since the Brock Weaver fight, nursing an injury. The guy's already 35 years old, and he cuts a ton of weight for 55. I don't feel like the cardio is going to be there if this fight goes late. He just has a ton of muscle, very physically strong guy. And you're right, man. He's just mean. He just gets in your face with a bunch of pressure, looking to land that massive right hand. But he does have a good calf kick. And Rong has a very wide kickboxing stance, and that's something I think, we could see him have a little bit of success with. On the side of Rong, man, he's exciting, but I'm not going to lie. I didn't even know this guy existed until this week, before tape study. I really like watching him. Maybe he slipped Dana White a $20 bill and says, I am 21, but my God, dude, 20 fights at his age is absolutely ridiculous. He's 14 years younger than Vargas is. He's on a 10-fight win streak and only needed the judges, like you said, twice in his entire career. Great frame for lightweight. One thing to note here is where he was fighting over in China, the lightweight is mandatory 154 pounds because he's the champ. He's going to have 2 extra pounds here to give, and for a good frame, 2 extra pounds, it's always those extra couple that, are the hard ones to cut. He's been scheduled 5 rounds multiple times, even though he's never needed it. So I expect the cardio, to definitely lean on his side here. But dude's an excellent striker, fights so well behind the jab, doubles it up and hides that right hand like you talked about so well. I love the fight doesn't go the distance, but ultimately I'm going to lay off this fight. But I think we probably both agree that Rong probably takes this one. He has a good chance of getting a finish too.
Yeah, he probably does. And like I said, if he had a little bit more experience against that upper echelon opponents, I would be more comfortable playing him. But at minus 250 right now, it's just out of playable range for a debutant.
I'm right there with you, man. We can move on to our men's bantamweight division, where we see Danaa Batgerel, who is 8-2, take on 9-2 Kevin Natividad. Batgerel, man, Mongolian fighter, does his camps out of Jackson Wink there in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This guy's 1-1 in the UFC, where he had a debut loss to Alatain. Just going to skip over. I know you'll touch on that in a second. Rebounds with a just absolute stellar performance against Guido Connelly. I mean, the guy sets up his right hand beautifully with his lead foot positioning and then just cracked him with the left hand. Send him to Queer Street, Both guys, they do have a really weak resume, so I really don't give either one of them the edge in competition there. But Dana's been out a whole year with the whole COVID stuff, being over in Asia, not been able to fight. But I expect improvements. This guy's extremely talented on the feet, far better kickboxer than Kevin Natividad is. With Kevin, he's trying to rebound from the last performance, leave you with a different taste in your mouth, where he was knocked out pretty bad by Miles Johns and, in the round 3 with that uppercut. But at 28 years old, man, he's experienced as could be. This guy's 13-1 as an amateur. He spent a lot of time in LFA. Normally, an organization that I'm pretty fond of, but they really didn't do Kevin too many favors. They fed him some cans. He's still doing split decisions with 7-7 fighters just last year. He's got wins over Erwin Rivera, Kai Kamaka, both I do believe like 0-2 in the UFC themselves. He's just marches forward with good cardio. Looks to land his big right hand, but his legs are there to absolutely get beat up. Batgerel today, we've already released a play for him, man, and I think he has a good chance of getting it done inside the distance as well.
Yeah, I also leave Danaa. I'm glad that we already played him. An experienced kickboxer and coming out of Jackson Wink as far as striking goes. I love that he's coming out of that camp. You can definitely see that striking experience when he is in the octagon. He has that long, accurate punches and his ability to keep his eyes on his opponent during their exchanges. You talked about that Alatang-Haley fight. Definitely a questionable loss. He had low output early, but really picked up the pace and ultimately outstruck Ali by 142 strikes and outlanded him by 50 strikes. I really don't think that there's much to say about that, but I do think that he, like you said, he rebounded against Guido Connelly and really showed us that he is that upper echelon striker. And I think that Kevin's in trouble here, man. He's coming off of his second TKO loss of his career against in his debut against Miles Johns. Shout out Todd Lally. But you're right. I'm wondering how he's going to bounce back from that. Whether he's going to try and shoot for a takedown, which I've seen in a lot of his previous fights, but he doesn't do a great job of setting up those takedowns, and I think that that's something that Danaa is going to make him pay for. When he's standing, like you said, that really low, wide stance, and his legs are going to get eat up. But not only that, he leaves that lead hand low, and you can guarantee that Danaa is going to throw his jab out and land it all night. If he doesn't get the finish, I could see him point fighting an easy unanimous decision just by hiding behind his jab whenever Kevin's trying to enter his range. Kevin is a black belt. If he gets it on the ground, I guess it could be a problem. But I don't see this getting to the ground, and if it does go to the ground, I wouldn't be surprised if Danaa's the one on top. We only saw it once in the Alatang fight, but he did shoot a perfectly timed takedown at the end of one of the rounds, and his wrestling looked legit. So I'm interested to see who takes the lead in that realm of the fight, but definitely leaning towards Danaa, whether it's on the ground or feet here.
Yeah, man, one of our more confident picks while we released it early, and if you're watching this, I think it's moving, against our favor, so make sure to get out there and, get your pick in.
Yeah, right now it's at minus 175, which is what we played it at. I don't see it being there for long, though.
Same with you, man.
We've got a great matchup in the featherweight division where we see Tristan Boondocks Connelly taking on Pat Sabatini. Connelly is coming off of a pretty big layoff, a plus 580-day layoff, and his last fight was all the way up at welterweight. Yeah. This fight's taking place in the featherweight division, and Connelly hasn't fought in the featherweight division since 2015. The two times that he did fight in the featherweight division, he lost. Yeah. That's more or less all I needed to know coming into this one to kind of really steer me towards the Sabatini side. I was already on him after tape study or whatever, but then also finding out those facts about Connelly, it really just pushed me over the edge. Sabatini's that Cage Fury FC featherweight champion. He redeemed his title after suffering that brutal arm injury to James Gonzalez, where he just got wrapped up in a really weird submission, kind of just like an arm crank, and really just popped, and he didn't even feel it, didn't react to it. Pretty awful injury, but then bounced back, went on a 2-fight win streak. In his tape study, man, he's very flowy on the feet. He does an amazing job of transitioning from his striking to his grappling, and he'll go to the old faithful overhand right to a double leg takedown like wrestlers like. He's insane with his top control, and I do think that he definitely has more upside in this matchup, and that's why I think the UFC is kind of doing him a favor by giving him the 35-year-old coming off of a layoff. Connelly's biggest win is to Michelle Piera, and even that you can kind of discredit a little bit because that's not the Piera that we see today that's beaten the Amadievs and whoever else. Chaos Williams, there you go. Connelly, he is a black belt, and he does have legitimate sub defense and legitimate sub submission offense. But I think Sabatini's just going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too strong in there. And I kind of compared this to our Joe Selecki bet over Jim Miller last 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, man. I'm right there with you here on the side of Pat Sabatini. But, on Connelly here, when you talk about just flat-out career resurgence, you have to mention the name of Tristan Connelly there. In 2016, this guy has a record of 5-5. He's opened up his own checkmat franchise, dedicated his life to the sport, and we've seen him, rep off 9 of his last 10 fights, being victorious. The UFC debut there, man, you talk about it because super happy for him, short notice. It's in his backyard there. I think it was in Vancouver. So happy for him. A long-awaited debut for him to get the win like that. But, to be honest with you, that was more of a case of what Michelle Pereira did wrong that night rather than what Tristan Connelly did wrong that night than what Tristan Connelly did right. Also, not a lot of tape out there, so I went to watch this James Lynch interview. The reason for the layoff, neck surgery, car accident, something you don't really like to see for a guy that's 35 years old. And then you talk about it, his unsuccess in the past down at featherweight, trying to take this one down at featherweight, man. But he's a tough dude. He comes to fight. What I don't like really here is it's just a flat-out bad matchup. He needs, to really execute his ground game to have success. And it's a nightmare matchup and a really excellent wrestler in Pat Sabatini there. I wish it was that one book, I think, opened it up at plus 105. Props to you if you got underdog money on Pat Sabatini because it's like a minus 200 opener everywhere else. He's a great prospect that I really, really like. Hard-nosed wrestler from up north, always sticks to the game plan, and you still can't stop it. He's been itching to make that UFC debut. Pat Sabatini was the guy fighting Rafael Alves when he missed by 14 pounds and stuff, and pulled that fight, obviously, but it's good to see that, the next pay-per-view, they're absolutely sending Alves to the slaughterhouse fighting, the dark horse at 155 there in Demiris Magulov. Nice to see him take some damage after the botched weight cut. But, dude, Pat Sabatini's beaten Tony Gravely, Bellator's Damon Blackshear, beating far superior guys than Tristan Connelly already. Everything in the stand-up is to set up the ground game, like you said. Flows from submissions super well, heavy on top. He has a 25-minute gas tank. I think the BJJ black belt and ultimately the toughness of Connelly is going to let him get let him see the scorecards. I think there's a lot of value on Sabatini by decision. But, dude, at a minus 225, 230, I would be willing to play Pat Sabatini straight. I think he's one of my more confident picks of the night.
I don't know, man. The more I talk about it, the more I get a little hesitant playing Sabatini. I think I'm okay with playing him, just maybe not as hard as I initially thought coming into this. I like the decision prop, and if I was trying to make a prop bet on this fight, I definitely would be taking Sabatini by decision. That being said, he has only been to decision 3 times in his career and lost 2 of them. That's definitely worrisome. And against somebody in Tristan Connelly, who is 35 years old, does have a little bit, at least more UFC experience than Sabatini here, it could be an issue. Like I said, I think I'm on Sabatini, and that decision prop does look pretty good.
Good, man. We move up to the middleweight division where we see the return of Brendan Allen, who's 15-4, taking on Karl Roberson, who's 9-3. Brendan Allen was a guy really, really high on, man. Bet him good going into that fight with Strickland, and, you just talk about an absolute letdown, just a downright shitty performance, in my opinion, and really left a stale taste in my mouth, weeks later going into tape study for this one. He debuts, against the 2020 Fighter of the Year against Kevin Holland. Has a sketch first round, but ends up pulling out the second round submission there. And, Kyle Dawkins, I don't know if he didn't take him serious, but that dude showed up to fight that night and gave him a hell of a fight. What I guess I read into more are these middleweights that he's lost to at LFA. He's got losses to Trevin Giles, Eric Anders, Fluffy Hernandez. But he's fighting these guys at 22 years old. He's taking them to decision. And all 3 of these guys are coming off UFC wins where they've looked really good. Fluffy at the massive upset over Vieira. We've never seen Eric Anders look any better, And Trevin Giles just took out a nice prospect in Ramon Delidze there. What I don't like about Brendan Allen is the dude's striking defense. It's basically non-existent. He's willing to just absolutely walk forward trying to get the takedown. But didn't even shoot once or twice against Sean Strickland. So I really question if he's kind of fallen in love with that striking too much. On Roberson, dude started the UFC career hot. TKO'd Ryan Spann on the Contender Series. Finishes Darren Stewart in round 1. He's a physically strong middleweight, a lot of muscle. He gets the rep for being the kickboxer. He's got an 0-3 kickboxing record. So, I get it. That's definitely his style of fighting. But let's not deem this guy some top-level kickboxer yet. You've had a couple positive COVID tests. The weight issues making him real inactive as of late. Missed weight in the Vettori fight, I think, which was the second time around. UFC wasn't letting him pull out this time. Fed him to Vettori, first round finish for Vettori there. It's a tough matchup, man, because I see Karl Roberson, he can have the path to success on the feet, but if this does go down to the mat, Brendan Allen has a massive advantage there. How do you see this one?
So another one that we don't agree on right here. I'm on the Roberson side. Allen, you touched on it. He's a young, big, strong grappler, and his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is something to write home about, But recently, he switched up camps to Sanford MMA, and working with Henry Hooft, it's like he fell in love with the striking. And in that last fight out against Sean Strickland, like you said, it's like he forgot how to wrestle. Yeah. Didn't shoot once, and didn't really improve his striking defense any either, which is something that you'd at least hope for with him, falling in love with the striking. Sometimes Allen, he gets a little bit too eager to get it to the ground, and he'll accept bottom position with hopes that he can sweep you. That's we saw that in like that Kevin Holland fight where he did land that huge elbow. It's just not something that I like to see. It's kind of similar to Tony Ferguson, where it's like even if he does get a win, it's a little shaky here and there. Where Karl Roberson, like you said, primary striker and the Glory Kickboxing veteran, but maybe gets a little bit too much credit. He does have an extremely fast left hand and a brutal left body kick, though, and he's dangerous in the clinch with his elbows over the top. He's training at Killer B with Corey Anderson right now, and I think that that's a great grappler to be training with, and you're getting prepared for somebody like Brendan Allen. Allen, it seemed like he might have clinched up a few times with Sean Strickland, and maybe because it was at catch weight 195 pounds and Allen weighed in 2 pounds under that limit, maybe he did just have a little bit of issues with the size advantage of Sean Strickland. Karl Roberson, like you said, he's not a small dude. Right. He's an ex-light heavyweight and came in 5 pounds over, and that's something that I think Brendan Allen could struggle with here again. Not to mention, the narrative is that Karl Roberson gets submitted by these guys. Well, these guys that are submitting him, I don't really think Brendan Allen holds a torch to. Like, we're talking about the Glover Teixeira, who's fighting for a title next, Marvin Vettori, who will probably be fighting for a title next, or roughly Cesar Fiera, like a world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I don't think Brendan Allen's on that level, and that's why I think Karl Roberson's here for primed for an upset, and probably why you see the odds so close right now. I'll be playing Roberson, but it's not somebody that I'm confident enough to want to do our contest on, and two, it's not somebody that I'm going to be playing necessarily. It's just kind of my lean.
Well, and you're not alone. Brendan Allen opened at a -205. He's since down to a -145. People are seeing what you're seeing, man. I like the move to Sanford MMA. I'm real quick to judge him off that one fight, but any move from Rufus Sport at this point is really good. But he's got better training partners down at Sanford MMA, better coaching, and I really expect improvements from the 25-year-old. Bilal Muhammad put out a tweet today, and apparently, Brendan Allen is a big fan of the Crocs.
Yes, sir.
So I got to go with my boy Brendan Allen. I think there's a clear advantage on the mat. Roberson's been open about really liking to fight southpaws. Brendan Allen's an orthodox. He's bringing tools that Karl Roberson really doesn't like to see. But it is a tough fight, man, and I absolutely see where you're coming from. I haven't made a play yet, but this is a really good fight on Saturday.
Cool. We move on to the welterweight division, where we see the body snatcher Dwight Grant, who's 10-3, taking on Stefan Sekulic, who's 12-3. Dwight Grant's 2-2 in the UFC and coming off that back and forth fight with Daniel Rodriguez. Man, after watching tape study, I was less than impressed with Dwight Grant. He's definitely more of a defensive fighter than an offensive fighter, and he'll back up and look for counters for all 3 rounds and bring it to a close decision in a fight where he could, look to take over. When he does counter, he'll duck his head and circle out and end up throwing a huge overhand right or a left hook and just circle out. And that's something that we saw him connect in the Pinder Soli fight. where he just kind of ducked through a winging overhand right and was able to land it. Outside of that, that looked to be a fight that was going to go the exact same as his last 4, where it's just going to be a boring, slow decision unless he gets knocked out or rocked. Stefan, he's coming off his debut loss to Ramazan Emeev all the way back in 2018, which set off a 3-year hiatus. He's looking over his record. You better watch your neck when you're grappling from him. His guillotine's insane. He's from Dagestan, so you know he's got that all around kind of combat sambo background. He really likes the body kick and the head kick, and that's something that we saw in the Adriano Balbi fight in 2017, where Balbi blocked it with his forearm, and dude's Sekulic's leg broke in half right over him, and he stepped back on it. Pretty awful one to watch. Don't recommend watching it. But, I hate Dwight Grant much that I want to bet Sekulic, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't think I gave this one enough attention for me to actually pick a plus 200 underdog with confidence. That being said, I definitely advise anybody to lay off of Grant in this position.
Right there with you, man. Grant, one of these guys to make good off the Contender Series, and since coming into the UFC, his career, like you said, it's been all over the place. 2 split decisions to Zach Otto, to Joe Bond. Those fights can really go either way. And, he hits D-Rod with that step back counter right hook, cleans his clock, looks good, and just straight pulls a stunt, gasses trying to put D-Rod away. They stand up, D-Rod lands a short left hook, sends him running across the octagon, and it's just spelled the end from that point on. The dude's 36, and, at 36, I don't like to see cardios and chin being an issue for you. It just spells the end of your career, in my opinion. He's also been plagued with injuries and layoffs. This dude's got 13 fights, and he's been fighting professionally for a decade now. So it's just constantly one thing after the other. Does got a nice, like you said, right hand, good left hook. He landed on Alejo Bond quite a few times, but the dude throws just power in all his shots, looking to clean your clock. Just looked for that home run shot too much. On the Sekulic side, if I'm being honest with you, I didn't even know this guy was in the UFC, man. I flat out did not know he fought Ramazan Emeev back in 2018. But it's just, one of the 3 losses for him that really aren't bad. His other loss comes to early in his career to David Zawada, another UFC fighter, and then the Adriano Balbi fight. He's dominating 12 minutes of that fight before he breaks his leg, Anderson Silva style, Tough dude, just like Silva. 8 months later, this guy's back in the octagon, finishing guys, getting wins. And, when you see a guy take some time off and still come back under 30 years old, you expect improvements to really be made, and he's got a really good wrestling pedigree. But like Dwight Grant, this guy's got low output as well and can sometimes back up against the cage. It is a dog or pass situation. I don't like Grant whatsoever, but like you said, you don't know what kind of Sekulic's going to show up here. I probably didn't do my due diligence to the plus 200 underdog, to feel confident as well. Dwight definitely has advantages on the feet. We saw in that Emeev fight. Emeev's got 2 TKOs in 20-something fights, and he dropped Sekulic multiple times in round 1. That's a guy with not much stand-up, where Dwight Grant does offer more on the feet. I'll pick Dwight Grant, but if he loses, I won't be surprised, and I'll actually be kind of happy.
Right. I'm hoping that I can get a little bit deeper into the Sekulic tape study after this podcast, and hopefully release a play or whatever for the plus 200 underdog. But as it sits right now, also lean Grant, although I don't like saying that.
It's a past situation altogether. Man, we take a step up in our prelim main event here. We see Randy Brown, who's 12-4, taking on Alex Oliveira, who's 22-9-1. Randy Brown is looking to leave a different taste in people's mouth after his last performance. He got absolutely beat down by Vicente Luque, and that's the number 6 welterweight in the world right now. So just put out Tyron Woodley, and the loss has, I guess you could say, aged well. Prior to that, though, he's on a 2-fight win streak, man. He pieces up Barberena and finishes him with a nice knee in round 3, and then he submits Warley Alves, a win that looks really good right now. Got a great frame, athleticism. He's really long. He has a really long jab that he likes to fight behind. Good kicks at his range. And he offers that really good knee up the middle for any guy that wants to try to wrestle him. Cowboy Oliveira doesn't really strike me as the type that studies his opponents, watches much tape on them. But there's a lot he could take away from that Vicente Luque fight, and the ability for Luque to just tear up that lead leg and just completely limit the movement of Randy Brown and keep him in front of him. Cowboy Oliveira, this dude debuted against fucking Gilbert Burns. He was up 2 rounds to Gilbert Burns before he loses it, and 5 fights in the UFC. He's headlining a Cowboy versus Cowboy fight night against Cerrone. This guy's he's been in the middle of attention since he started. He's an absolute wild man in the cage. But the bull riding, the wars, it's taken a toll on this guy's body, and I really don't know how much he's got left in the tank. The fire that he's got these days. He's TKO'd by Yancy Medeiros, and Yancy's not really the type to TKO many people there. Gets split open bad by Gunnar Nelson, and then just straight up out-hustled by Nicholas Dalby and Mike Perry on the feet. Cowboy Oliveira really lacks that fire that I like to see. I like Randy Brown to win here.
Yeah, I am also leaning Randy Brown here. I actually noted that they kind of have a mirroring style, but Randy Brown's a little bit more technical, where Oliveira's a little bit wilder and a little sloppier on the feet. Oliveira, he's kind of developed into a guy that just welcomes wars, kind of punch for a punch type of guy, and ultimately kind of cemented himself as kind of this gatekeeper, floating around journeyman of the division. In the past few years, his chin and durability that he's relied on has really started to give out on him. And like you said, coming from the background that he does and having 9 losses at 33 years old, it's a little bit different the way he's aging versus a lot of these other fighters. Yep. I personally could see this being kind of a boring karate-style point fight. Although I did just say Oliveira kind of welcomes the war, Randy Brown kind of doesn't. Right. I think he'd be much more comfortable using his length and staying at range and trying to just kind of piece him apart and pick him apart with his jabs and kicks. Randy Brown, he has great vision when he's throwing his combos and can really look untouchable whenever he starts to get that flow on. I kind of compared that Barberina finish to the way that Conor finished Chad Mendez in his fight, where he's just walking down with complete confidence and knows not to rush things and that the finish will ultimately come. He says he spent some time down at King's MMA for this camp and got some really good training with Vittori and Gastelum, and that's something that I'm looking for him to bring into this fight, just a little bit of that experience fighting those bigger guys. And like you said, he's got to fix that leg kick. He said that he's addressed it in this camp leading up to it, and hopefully he shows it, because that is something that was a glaring hole in his game and one that Luque really exposed. I think I'm going to lean Randy Brown for sure. I don't know what he sits at right now.
It's a minus 150 if I'm mistaken.
Minus 150.
Yep.
We're both leaning him, and after talking it over, I feel a little bit more confident that if we're both leaning him, we should probably just play a straight bet on him.
Absolutely, man. Agree with you 100%, and I think Randy Brown probably takes this one. I could see him, like you said, point fighting his way to a decision.
Kicking off our main card, we go to the light heavyweight division, where we see Anthony Lionheart-Smith, who's 34-16, taking on Jimmy the Brute Crute, who's 12-1. It's not a secret, I'm not a big fan of Lionheart at all. I don't really know if he's that elite level fighter, and if anything, his fighting style is less than desirable. He has a tendency to kind of shell up whenever he's fighting people, and it's like he's never gotten used to the power of the 205er since moving up a division. I think that Anthony Smith's best chance of winning this fight is to kind of endure that initial damage that Jimmy Crute is going to give him, and kind of drag the fight out to try and see what Jimmy Crute looks like in those later rounds. In his last 5 fights, he hasn't seen the judges, and that's something that you got to wonder, somebody who's only 25 years old and 12-1, if dragging him into those deep waters, if that's where you're going to start to see the holes in his game start to open up. And that's something that I guess somebody in Anthony Smith, having as many fights as he does, could take advantage of. That being said, Crute's an extremely hot light heavyweight prospect, and at only 25 years old, he's got a very long career ahead of him. He's a finisher with 9 of his 12 wins by submission or knockout. I'll be kind of interested how he approaches this fight. We've seen him already kind of pay the price with the Misha Serkinov fight, trying to bring the fight on the mat with somebody who's a high level BJJ. I imagine that Crute's going to want to keep this fight standing. Anthony Smith did just go out there and submit Devin Clark in his last fight, and so I'm sure that he's more than happy with going out and getting a fight like that rather than taking the initial damage. I am a little hesitant betting on Crute. He hasn't really had any quality wins. I guess you could make an argument for Paul Craig now, but Paul Craig has shown some pretty obvious holes in his game, where Smith, he's beaten those upper echelon guys like Gus and Volk and maybe Devin Clark. But I do like Jimmy Crute here. I think he's going to dominate Anthony Smith, but it's not something that I want to play straight. He's looking around the minus 180 right now, and it's just something that I might need a little bit more time over the week to look over the fight before I'm confident in a play.
For sure, man. It's a very exciting fight. One of the best ones throughout the entire card, if you ask me. Lionheart has a name for a reason, dude. This guy has shown unreal, durability and heart throughout his career. After the Aljo incident, I respect this guy a ton more. Could have taken Jones's belt. Goes out like a man there, but. He's only 32 years old. He's had 50 fights, and, over half of those have either been, just brutal wars or, man, him curled up in fetal position, taking a lot of unnecessary damage there. Last fight, much needed for Anthony Smith. A big step down in competition. He's sitting at the number 6 light heavyweight in the world. He gets an unranked fighter there. And, Devin Clark had his moments, man. Landed a big right hand and, ended up on top, even despite getting taken down himself. But, the jiu-jitsu for him was just too much there. Black belt there, super dangerous off his back. A couple rear naked chokes, I believe, over Gus and Ozdemir there, where he's, like you said, taken the damage early and been able to, to come back late. Neither really has the best of gas tanks, but, Smith has shown that heart and been able to get those finishes late, so I do lean to him in that aspect. But, damn, Jimmy Crute is one of my favorite light heavyweights to watch right now at only 25. You talked about, going to be in the light heavyweight division for quite some time here. He's trained by K1 kickboxing legend Sam Greco. Just an absolute workhorse, man. He's all action. He recently got his BJJ black belt as well. Dude has got some of the hardest calf kicks I've ever seen, and we saw Rakic eat Lionheart up with them. Big thing that I think Jim Crute needs to come out here and utilize here is get those leg kicks established. It's just going to open up that right hand even more for him. I am real quick, to put Jim Crute up there with some of those guys like you talked about, that Anthony Smith, John Jones, Rakic, Gus, Vulcan. Jim Crute has not seen those side of people yet. Not that level of competition yet, but, I definitely think Jim Crute is on the way to seeing that type of competition, and I really like him in this spot. If it continues to dip down more to that minus 155 opener, I'd be tempted to play him straight. But I don't mind parlaying him with someone like Pat Sabatini, risking just a little bit at plus money somewhere.
I think that's probably what we'll end up doing. Like you said, Crute is the future, and it's between him and Magomed Ankalaev for who's going to touch the belt in the near future.
For sure, man. I'm glad we agree there. We'll go to our middleweight division, man. We see Chris Weidman, who is 15-5, taking on Uriah Hall, who is 16-9, and this is going to be an interesting fight for us. We're introducing the inaugural casual cap to the game, making the challenge like we normally do. Loser's going to wear that every week. Ty was supposed to be wearing that this week, but refuses to after losing, Espino there.
We just have to have a cleaner start to this competition. I feel like that would just be an awful way to start this off. So we're fresh start here with the Weidman Hall bet.
I'll let you slide on there, man. For Weidman and Hall, it's a rematch from 2010 here, where both these guys, earlier in their careers, trying to get into the UFC, took on each other, and Weidman TKOs them pretty early in the first round. You got Weidman coming off his win over Amari Akhmedov, looking to make it 2 wins in a row. It's something Weidman has not been able to say for quite some time now. I mentioned, career resurgence with Connelly. When you talk about career downfalls, you have to mention Chris Weidman here. I see people throwing out the USADA stuff. I kind of lean more toward that fight he had with Rockhold, because neither one of them have really shown, that desire, that chin, any of them anymore, and since losing that belt, he's had 1 win in the last 5 or 6, in that last 5 or next 6-year gap, and that was over, Kelvin Gastelum, an ex-welterweight there, who I still believe is a welterweight, where he was saved by the bell, should have been TKO'd round 1. Proceeds to, take on Yoel, where he's absolutely left stone cold dead in his tracks with a knee. TKO by Musashi, and then fight of the night with Jacare is, maybe even takes a worse knockout than the Yoel one. And then follows it up where he tries to go up to light heavyweight. I don't think I can think of one middleweight that's gone up and had success yet. Doesn't even put up a fight. TKO'd first round by Dominic Reyes, and sent back down to where he belongs here. The Omari Akhmedov win, not that impressive. Should have won that. Glad he did. On the side of Uriah Hall, it's funny that he took on Anderson Silva in his retirement fight because he was kind of poised to be the next Anderson Silva after getting that highlight reel TKO on the Ultimate Fighter. Ends up losing to Gastelum in the finals, where wrestling really was an issue for him. But this guy's just king of split decisions, low volume, causing him some issues. And I think Chris Weidman's going to be able to out-wrestle him and maybe still to this day have the better hands, but I know you see it a little different.
Yeah, I do see it differently. I've got Hall here. Weidman, like you said, since that Rockhold loss, he just hasn't looked the same. And those 4 losses since then, they've just been awful. Yeah. Awful. And at 36 years old, I really do think that he's on the decline, and it's going to stay that way. He was really lucky to get the Omari Akhmedov fight, in my opinion, because that's the only other guy in the division with a worse gas tank than him. In my opinion, Weidman probably should have retired after that fight because it doesn't look like a very bright future. Yeah. That being said, Uriah Hall is kind of lucky he's getting this fight himself. There's not very many people in the middleweight division that I see Hall getting the dub over. Looking over his record, he has a pretty spotty record, and it doesn't make you want to bet him. But I will pick him here, right? He's strung together a decent 3-fight win streak, but it hasn't been dominant at all. It's kind of weird because I could put together this highlight clip of Uriah Hall and tell you he's the next big thing, right, and everybody would jump on board without knowing what he's been through up till this point. He puts on highlight reel KOs. He's got explosive strikes and accuracy out of this world. He just lacks the killer instinct. He's talked about how he got into fighting because he was bullied, and I just don't think that he has ever been the bully in his life, and that's something that personally I think would benefit you in a sport like MMA. So I could definitely see Hall losing this on inactivity, but I think if he makes Weidman work more than 2-3 times to take him down, Weidman's going to be gassed, and we can see Hall light him up on the feet in the later rounds like we've seen in the past, and eventually KO Weidman. It doesn't really benefit you to take Uriah Hall at inside the distance. I think it's about a 60-point shift from his money line, which I think is more than playable at plus money now. For sure. I definitely see where you're coming from, and it's something to note that we're back in the bigger octagon, and Uriah Hall's going to have a lot more time or a lot more space to move around. Weidman's going to have to chase those takedowns a little bit more. Man, it is a tricky fight. I'm going with Weidman, who took the one, back in 2010 there. If you're a big numbers person and, rematches in the UFC, the winner takes it 62% of the time to get out of pick'em. There's value there, but it really is it's a grappler versus a striker. I think I've paid the price too many times picking the striker. I like Chris Weidman to hopefully stick to the roots. Been training with Lionheart a whole lot with Wonder Boy. Hope he sticks to the roots and wrestles, man, and makes us, takes it where he needs to be, because I agree with you on the feet. It's all Hall there. Cool. Our first title fight of the night, we have Valentina the Bullet Shevchenko, who's 20-3, taking on Jessica Andrade, who's 21-8. Valentina Shevchenko, in my opinion, is the best pound-for-pound fighter in women's MMA history. She's outstruck Holly Holm. She armbarred Juliana Pena. She's literally starched girls like Jessica Ai. And the only adversity that she's really faced up until this point in the UFC is Amanda Nunes, who, in my opinion, is just a little bit bigger. I think Valentina is more technical than her, and I think that if obviously Shevchenko can meet Nunes up at a weight class, but if she was built similarly to Nunes, she would have the better MMA talent, in my opinion. In her last fight against Maia, Valentina ultimately had to go to her own grappling skills, which we haven't seen a lot of, but ended up getting the job done pretty easy against Maia, landing all 5 of her takedown attempts. That's not to say that she didn't look human in the second round. Yeah. Maia did find some success and ended up having like 3 or 4 minutes of control time on top of Shevchenko, which is something that we had never seen. Right. And I know that we were scrambling for some live lines whenever that happened. Jessica Andrade, she's finally settled into a weight class that we feel like she probably should have been for a long time.
Yeah.
She's coming off of 2 straight losses at strawweight, and she only needed 1 win to get this title shot, which normally you'd hear people complain about, but it's been straight crickets online. So I'll give her credit where credit is due. She's only lost to the best 115-pounders and the best 135-pounders in the world. Unlucky for her, Shevchenko is unquestionably the best 125-pounder out there. So this is going to be a little bit more of the same. You can expect Andrade to try and keep this close and close the distance and kind of keep this at that dirty boxing range. You can also try and expect her to test the takedown defense of Shevchenko, but anything to keep from being picked apart on the outside like most girls.
Man, all over Valentina really here. She's looking to make her 5th title defense. She's absolute stone cold killer, man. Division was basically created for this girl, and it's really going to take like a Matt Serra GSP type of moment to take this girl's belt from her, in my opinion. Tiger Muay Thai product, 17-time world Muay Thai champion. This girl's been with her coach forever, trains at a high level with her sister. You always see her, even on her Instagram pictures, out of camp. She's in killer shape, She got 3 losses, one of them to Liz Carmouche, which she absolutely, avenged with a, easy 50-45 decision or something. And then you talk about the 2 losses to Maina Nunes, and they're up a weight class and stuff, in a division where she was just too small for Nunes, but can argue that she could be 1-1 there, man. I put up a damn good fight.
Her face was rose.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Super patient, very calculated on the feet. This girl is very, very accurate with her punches, and you don't ever see her look for that, that home run shot, always thrown in 2-3 punch combinations. But what she does best, man, is just sit at range, rack up the points with the kicks, and switch levels with them great. In a Jessica's life almost. But Jessica Andrade there, on the other hand, crickets online because, the state of the flyweight division, with 1 win over a former title challenger like Qileng, you will get a title shot. And when you got Lauren Murphy versus Joanne Calderwood as, your number 1 contender fight, Jessica definitely deserves this title shot here. She's only 29 years old, which is kind of crazy. You talk about all the people she fought at bantamweight where she's super undersized, and then all the fights that she had at strawweight, even winning the belt. This girl was 7-3 at that weight class, so I see why she stays there. But 125 is a great weight class for her. She should have probably been there once it opened. This girl swings just heavy hooks at you, trying to close the distance, but she struggles with technical strikers, and Valentina is just the most technical of them all. Easy pick for me here with Valentina, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Move on to one of our more exciting fights here. We got Zhang Weili, who's 21-1, taking on Rose Namajunas, who's 9-4 for the women's strawweight belt. We've already released a 1-unit play on the underdog there in Rose Namajunas. With Zhang Weili, she's coming off literally one of the best fights ever, man. Male or female, the fight with Joanna was absolutely nuts. And she's on the tear of a lifetime. She lost her first pro fight, has won 20 fights since then. 5-0 in the UFC, and it has to be some type of record, man. 12 months to win the belt, since she got there. She's an absolute global superstar. I think that's why she's probably in the co-main event, here instead of Valentina. She gets a title shot in her home country of her backyard against Andrade there in China. UFC really likes this girl. She's super technical. Everything is straight down the pipe. She's all offense, willing to plant her feet and just absolutely throw. I think she really needs to look at the leg kicks here to try to stop some of that movement of Rose. Rose, man, she's fought at the highest level of, the competition her entire career. Her 3rd pro fight is against Tisha Torres. A loss, but she gets that one back later in her career. Immediately thrown on the Ultimate Fighter, where she finishes 3 girls in a row, and then gets Carla Esparza, where ultimately just not ready for the better wrestler who submits her for the inaugural flyweight or strawweight belt there. But then goes on an absolute tear, winning 6 of her next 7 fights, beating Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice. Trains with her husband Pat Barry. Trains with Trevor Whitman a lot with Valentina. Man, Rose looks good, and I think she's poised for a big upset on Saturday.
Hey, I couldn't agree with you more. Like you said, we've already made a play on this. And yeah, Weili Zhang, shown to be an absolute killer since entering the UFC. At only 5'4", but absolutely stacked. She's built like Andrade. She's built like the more muscular girls of the division. And like you said, all of her strikes are thrown to KO you. She doesn't mind getting into a slugfest, which I find a lot of comparisons that I can draw from Jessica Andrade and her. Mm-hmm. I think they have similar fight styles, similar builds. And that being said, Zhang, she does have a great job at mixing in takedowns, averaging over one a fight. You never really know when she's going to slip that in, and that's something that she does catch a lot of girls off guard with. She's coming off that hard-fought split decision to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, where she was outlanded by Joanna, but did give massive amounts of damage, more damage.
Particularly to the forehead.
Particularly to the forehead, that ultimately won that fight. And even without the forehead thing, I think we both agree she the rightful girl won that. But she was outlanded, and that's definitely something to note. Rose Namajunas, she's an experienced technical striker, and she really uses great footwork and movement on the feet. Mm-hmm. And she also offers the BJJ skills where you don't want to go to the mat with her. She's got plenty of her wins by submission. And, like I said, on the feet, she uses that footwork and really uses her length to an advantage, which I think is going to be her key in this Zhang fight. Mm-hmm. Something that Joanna did a lot was get in range with Zhang, and she paid the price for it with the counters that Zhang was offering. Rose needs to stay at range and just pick her apart. Personally, I think if you take that crazy slam KO that Jessica Andrade had on Namajunas, Rose would right now be on the biggest tear of her life and a favorite in this spot against Zhang. I think that this fight will probably play out close to the Andrade Rose 2, and I think that it will be a hard fought kind of coin flip type fight, but that's why I love Rose at plus 180 in this spot so much. I got 3 questions to ask yourself if you're out there, if you are considering betting Rose. Is Rose better than Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who just went to a split decision with Zhang? I would say yes.
The record shows yes.
Huh?
The record shows yes.
The record shows yes. And is Rose's style similar to Joanna Jędrzejczyk? I would also say yes, and then an added threat with her jiu-jitsu on the ground. And then I ask you, if Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang was rebooked, keep in mind that Joanna outstruck her in the first match, where do you think that fight would be lined? I personally think that would be a pick'em fight, and if we've already established that Rose Namajunas is the better fighter, has a similar style to Joanna, sitting at plus 180 right now is an absolute steal in my opinion. I'm gonna try and call this one. We've actually already made a play on the under on this fight. Yep. I like the flying knee KO from Rose here. I think that she tried to land it on Jessica Andrade plenty of times and got really, really close. And I think Weili Zhang over the course of 5 rounds is going to fall into the trap.
I love it, man. Like you said, releasing a play on the under. I think Rose has real potential to get it done inside the distance, but covers us a little bit with Zhang Weili in case she lands a big bomb. I hate to call any fighter's, title victory a fluke, but Jessica Andrade comes in at a minus 175 against Rose in their first fight. She wins via KO slam. They rematch this, 1 fight difference later, and Rose comes in as the minus 200 favorite. The public knew exactly how that fight was going, how it was going to go. Rose, like you said, without that slam, could still rightfully be the strawweight champ and defended it multiple times here. Zhang Weili's going to have to make it one of those, another difficult fight where she has to close a lot of distance, and Rose fights deceptively long, man. When I saw 5'5", it kind of surprised me. She looks like she's 5'7", 5'8". Right. She fights really deceptively long, and I think she's going to cause Zhang Weili a lot of problems on the feet, and I love her underdog play.
I got a couple more knocks on Rose real quick. One, I don't know if we touched on it enough, but it's definitely, we got to bring up her mental side of the game. She has struggled with that in the past, and she's been really open about it. Leading up to the fight, this fight week, she's fragile. And I really do hope that she can stay focused. It seems like, if you haven't heard, her comment, it's better red than dead. Like she's fired up about this Weili Zhang Chinese type deal. So I do think that she's going to be focused, and hopefully that doesn't take away from her skills and her game plan. And secondly is, I know a lot of people are questioning Rose Namajunas' durability, and that's your reasoning for betting Weili Zhang. One, we covered that in our under pick, and then 2, what makes you question Rose's durability issues? You talk about the Andrade, the second fight. Maybe if Andrade had a few more moments or had a few more minutes, she could have finished it. Outside of that, she's lost twice by decision, and the Carla Esparza finish, she just got out grappled. In no way, shape, or form do I think that Rose Namajunas has shown any reason for us to put a lot of stock in her durability issues, and that's why I think we're ultimately just I'm really happy with our play on Rose.
For sure, man, I am as well.
In our main event, the rematch that only these two guys asked for. Kamara, the Nigerian Nightmare Usman, who's 18-1, is taking on Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. Get that right. Usman, he has the perfect build for 170 pounds. With his wrestling base and his upper body strength, he can really bring the fight just about anywhere that he wants. Not to mention he has like an endless gas tank and one of the most physically draining styles that he really just wears on you and has been able to impose his will on practically everybody he's fought.
At 30%.
At 30%. As I've always said, the first fight is always the best indicator that you could use for how the second fight's going to go. And even though Masvidal took that last fight on 6 days' notice, I don't think that the gap between his takedown defense and Usman's wrestling offense is going to be able to be closed in under a year's time. Usman, I really do think that there's only one guy out there that can beat Usman, and that's Colby Chaos Covington. And I truly do believe that. I think that's a coin flip. If you run that back 10 times, they each win 5 of it. If you buy into what Usman's been saying, this time he's got something to prove, and he's going to be going out there and trying to get the finish. And that's something that we're buying into. We took the under 4.5 already, and I'm glad that we did. I also think that it's nice that taking that under 4.5, we're pretty much playing Jorge as well. I think that's the only way he has to win this because that's the only way that he's ever won against a grappler. He fought that Ben Askren fight, and outside of that knee, I really do think he was about to get ragdolled for, I don't even know if it was a main event, but if it was, 25 minutes, in the 9 months that Jorge had off, he really got out of shape. On that tour that he did with Trump, he looked awful, and that's something I don't like to see in these upper echelon fighters. And when you look down at his past 3 wins, you've got Till, who's not in the division anymore, Askren, who's retired, and Nate Diaz, who's a lightweight and a subpar fighter at that,
50-50 record.
I mean, Masvidal, he's got a 77% takedown defense, and he held Usman to a 37% takedown defense in their last fight, but that was Usman shooting 16 different times, and he ultimately ended up getting 5 takedowns and really controlling it. I see this one going pretty much the same way, except for I see Usman getting him to the ground and possibly subbing him. And then always the possibility that Jorge gets some crazy-ass KO. Right,
man. I'm right there with you. I think Kamaru Usman could route himself a very dominant decision if things got sketchy, but I think he's coming here to prove a point on Saturday. I very much agree with you with the Colby statement. I even agree, Colby has done way more to probably deserve a fight with Kamaru Usman than Jorge has right now. Jorge's just got that 6-day excuse that, and the fans love him right now that's got him that rematch. But the welterweight division it's also kind of been a tricky point. You've got Kamaru Usman sitting at the top. He's beaten 4 of the top 5 welterweights, just sitting at Wonderboy, at number 5, who he hasn't. But none of the top 5 welterweights have beaten a single guy in the top 5 right now, except for Wonderboy 3 years ago when he beat Jorge. So, he kind of has the right to pick and choose who he's going to fight. He's basically beat them all. And, if you want to extend that a little bit further, he's beaten Woodley, he's beaten Maia, he's beaten RDA. Dude, at one point he beat 7 of the top 10 welterweights the division had to offer. This guy has easily cemented himself as a pound-for-pound fighter, regardless of how much I, don't really like him. He's not really, I guess you could say a fan favorite, charismatic. He's getting better behind the mic, though, I guess you could say. The call out of the Jorge, it was nice. He's getting a little voice on him.
He's at least embracing the cringe, which I guess is the right move for him.
But I like, the Burns performance, man. I think it was a championship performance, in my opinion, if you ask me. You had all the shit about them being ex-training partners, him changing gyms over the case here, and he got stung early. And, he really showed championship mentality to me in that fight. the move to Colorado with Trevor Whitman must be nice. He's decided to stay there again for this camp. I truly think even that Burns fight, as he kind of started to get that read, you saw the Trevor Whitman work evident already. The pull counter on his right hand was nice. He worked behind his jab so well, and you saw fucking Kamaru Usman switching stances, throwing kicks, when, something brand new for him. With Jorge, he's guaranteeing a better performance this time out. I hope to God he does. But, he really just hasn't, done enough for me to earn just that other one. He's still lucky to be in the position he is. Till was talking about being blind, during that weight cut. He couldn't even see anything. And then you move on to, who's his next fight? Ben Askren. Even a regular TKO of Ben Askren in the second or third round, he's not as hyped up as he is, And then to get Nate Diaz, like you said, it's a lightweight coming up to welterweight who had no business being there in a fight. I knew exactly what was going to happen,
A 500 record, too.
Exactly. He's like, 20 and 11, 20 and 12, something bad, With Jorge, though, I think his best chances are going to come early in this fight with something that he catches Kamaru Usman with. With Kamaru, the later it goes, the more read he's going to be able to get on this fight. But, training out of ATT, they're known for having a good game plan, so I expect him, to come in here with a well-executed game plan. He's got good dirty boxing, throws in combination, but, man, dude, I favor Usman so heavily here. If the fight does get, sketchy for a minute, he has the ability to make it boring and put you right back on the fence. But I do love the fight not going the distance at plus 175 because, if Usman, you're going to get on the mic and make a statement like that, you better come to finish. And I promise you Jorge's not there on 6 days' notice to get 50-45 again.
I 100% agree. He's going to be going out on his shield, in my opinion. Even though he is notorious for not being finished, I really do think that this is a spot where Usman is just so much better than him that he could really implement his game plan whenever he wants and finish the fight.
Right there with you, man. So that concludes all 13 fights, man. If you had to pick one of these fights throughout the entire list, what's one of these that stand out here for you as a big favorite people should keep their eye on?
Mine's got to be the Allen versus Roberson fight. I think that's going to be an absolute barn burner and one where I see the underdog winning. So that's something I really am interested in seeing.
Nice, man. Kind of see the underdog winning myself. The fight I think people need to pay attention for is that co-main event. Zhang, Weili, and Rose kind of got a little tension building up and everything, and both those girls really come to put on a show. If 26 fighters throughout the card, one that stands out for me, man, I'm gonna go with the champ Kamaru Usman. Dude's talking big talk. You got something to prove here, and I expect a big statement for him.
Yeah, mine's got to be Uriah Hall. This is actually one of the only guys in the top 15 that I think he has a shot at, and I do think again another. I think technically an underdog now who I see getting it done. So I'm really interested in seeing. Oh, now that I'm looking at it, it's once again a striker versus grappler that I'm picking on this card. So, yeah.
We don't want to pick Rose as the dog, so we got to pick one more dog that you like throughout the card you think has a good shot of winning.
It's the Karl Roberson. Yeah. I really do think that he's the best line dog right now, sitting at plus 130. He's playable.
I see it, man. For me, I guess I'm going to go with Liang all the way back in the first fight. This woman, she literally has all the physical advantages you could ever want in a fight. She just needs to put it together, man. And for the best bet for me, he's sitting at a minus 225, kind of like Selecki a few weeks ago, man. I think Pat Sabatini is going to be my lock. I think he's better just about everywhere this fight could go.
I like it. My best bet of the night is going to be a play that we've already made in Danaa Batgerel. I think that he's got Kevin Natividad beat just about everywhere. Yeah. And at minus 175, I'm happy to lay a couple units on him.
For sure, man. I completely agree. That concludes all the fights. We're back in a live crowd, man, for UFC 261. I'm so hyped for this. Hope you guys are cashing with us. And in the comments there, let us know who you guys got in these 3 title fights. Really interested to hear.
Happy 420. Peace.